To France now, where President Emmanuel Macron is on a collision course with rail workers' unions. They oppose plans to overhaul the national Sncf railway. Planned measures include scrapping lifetime employment guarantees workers have enjoyed since the 1930s. Opinion polls show that 69% of French people support the government's push for more flexible contracts and greater efficiency. But the unions are threatening industrial action if the government goes ahead with its plans. For more on Macron's fight with French railway unions, Elena Casas joins us live from Paris. Elena, great to have you on the show. Now, the rail unions in France have long been amongst the country's most powerful. What are Macron's chances of winning in his fight against them and pushing through these cost cuts that he feels SNCF needs?
Well, as you were saying, because the unions have been powerful in the railway sector for decades, rail staff have privileges enjoyed by no one really in any other sector in France. Since 1920, they've had a special social security regime that Macron now wants to scrap, which means that not only do they have jobs for life, but most of them have the right to retire between 50 and 55, when of course the national retirement age is now 62. So he wants to see them working for much longer. The problem, of course, is that rail unions have an ability, unlike any other sector in the economy, to grind the country to a halt if they're not happy. And they've already called a general strike for the 22nd of March, and they're also threatening to go on indefinite strike from the 15th of March onwards. That's the day after these plans are expected to be announced in detail. And the problem, of course, is that if they do manage to cause much travel disruption, the government historically here in France has always been forced to back down.
Elena, give us an idea of just how bad a state SNCF is in.
Well, the National Rail Company is in debt to the tune of almost 50 billion euros. It's perhaps worth pointing out that the government's new proposals don't really fill in detail how they would fill that gap. Just cutting the pensions of railway workers won't provide anywhere near enough money. They did suggest axing rural rail lines, which are used by very few people, but they've already had to backtrack on that part of the plan. So we don't know quite how they're going to fill the cash gap. The government is also portraying itself as sort of the supporter of ordinary rail users against the unions. They say that recently things like punctuality and overcrowding have been getting worse in France. It's perhaps worth pointing out that it's nowhere near as bad as in comparable countries like, for example, Britain. The SNCF does run a significantly more punctual and efficient service than, for example, British railway providers in general, but certainly statistics show that they are getting worse.
It's probably not too hard to be better than the British railways. Look, the public in France has so far been supportive of Macron's economic reforms. How does the French public view the position of SNCF? Do they agree that it needs to be reformed?
Well, certainly the railway workers, because they have this hugely more generous social security regime that's not really comparable to benefits that anybody else has, do make an easy target for the government. Of course, it's easy for them to say that in the 1920s, 1930s, railway drivers did have very difficult jobs to do, which of course in the age of the modern train, they don't really have any more. So the majority of the public, 69% according to a poll, as you were saying, does feel that that special status should be taken away from them. The problem, of course, though, is that this is just part of a series of controversial and divisive reforms that Macron is trying to push through. And he's not just trying to cut back on pensions for railway workers, but on pensions for civil servants across the board. And that means there's quite a wide demographic of people that could turn against these reforms if they're managed badly by the government.
Elena, we're running out of time, but very quickly, the Prime Minister, Philippe Edouard, has said that the government will push through these reforms by decree if necessary. What are the political risks for the Macron government if it's forced to do that?
Well, that is the plan. They're not even going to try to pass this through Parliament, we don't expect. They're going to go straight to doing it by executive order, as Macron did back in October for his controversial labour reform. And of course, the political risk is that if he keeps using this instrument rather than passing laws through Parliament in the usual way, that it does look like he's turning a little bit dictatorial, a bit authoritarian with these controversial reforms, and that he's not making very much effort to win over the public.
OK, we'll leave it there. Elena Casas in Paris, thank you very much indeed.